The morning mist clung to the rocky mountain foothills like a whispered secret, and Marcus Chen adjusted his backpack straps as he navigated the familiar switchbacks of Bear Creek Trail. At 34, he'd been hiking these Colorado paths for over a decade, finding solace in the rhythm of his boots against packed earth and the steady burn in his calves. Today felt different, though heavier somehow, as if the weight of his recent divorce papers tucked in his glove compartment back at the trailhead was somehow following him up the mountain. The September air carried the crisp promise of autumn, and golden aspen leaves danced in the gentle breeze. Marcus paused to catch his breath, pulling out his water bottle as he surveyed the valley below. The small town of Pine Ridge looked peaceful from this height, its red-roofed houses dotting the landscape like scattered toys. He'd moved there 6 months ago, seeking a fresh start after his marriage had crumbled under the weight of mismatched dreams and silent resentments. As he rounded a bend near the 3-mile marker, something caught his eye. At first he thought it was just a discarded jacket, a flash of navy blue against the rust-colored trail. But as he approached, his heart lurched. A woman lay motionless on the rocky ground, her dark hair spilled across the dirt like spilled ink. "Hey," Marcus called out, dropping his pack and rushing forward. "Miss, are you okay?" She was young, maybe late 20s, with olive skin and delicate features that were currently pale and drawn. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and Marcus quickly checked for obvious injuries. No visible blood, no twisted limbs, but her lips had a slight blue tinge that worried him. He gently shook her shoulder. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the mountain silence. Marcus pulled out his phone, cursing when he saw the familiar no-service display. They were too far from any cell towers, and the nearest ranger station was at least 2 miles back down the trail. He looked around desperately, noting the steep drop-off to one side and the thick pine forest on the other. They were completely alone. The woman stirred slightly, a soft moan escaping her lips. Marcus positioned himself to shield her from the morning sun and continued trying to rouse her gently. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing glimpses of deep brown eyes that seemed to struggle to focus. "That's it," Marcus encouraged softly. "Come on back, you're safe now." Finally, her eyes opened fully, blinking against the filtered sunlight. For a moment, she seemed disoriented, her gaze darting round wildly before settling on Marcus's concerned face. He expected relief, maybe confusion, perhaps even fear at waking up to find a stranger hovering over her. Instead, her first words hit him like a physical blow. "Why did you save me?" The question hung in the mountain air between them, loaded with a pain so raw that Marcus felt his breath catch. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but the anguish in those 5 words was unmistakable. This wasn't confusion from a head injury or disorientation from fainting. This was something much deeper, much darker. Marcus sat back on his heels, studying her face. "I'm sorry, what?" She struggled to sit up, wincing as she did. "I said, why? Did you save me? You should have just ... left me alone." The desperation in her voice made Marcus's chest tighten. He'd heard that tone before in his own voice, during the darkest moments of his divorce when everything had felt hopeless. But this was different. This felt final. "What's your name?" he asked gently, offering her his water bottle. She hesitated, as if even that simple information was too much to share. "Emma," she finally whispered. "Emma Rodriguez. Emma Marcos." Marcus Chen. He kept his voice calm and steady. "Emma, are you hurt? Did you fall?" Emma's laugh was bitter, completely at odds with the peaceful mountain setting. Fall, I guess you could call it that. She looked around, seeming to remember where she was. How long was I out? I don't know. I just found you a few minutes ago. Marcus carefully studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way her clothes hung loosely on her frame. When did you last eat something? Emma started, then stopped, confusion flickering across her features. I'm not sure. Yesterday, maybe the day before. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Emma, we need to get you some help. There's a ranger station back at the trailhead, and no. The word came out sharp and final. No hospitals, no doctors, no anything. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. I came up here for a reason. The implication hung between them like a loaded gun. Marcus had to swallow hard before he could speak again. What reason? Emma's hands shook as she wrapped her arms around herself. To end it, to finally just ... stop. The words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would somehow lessen their impact, and then you had to come along and ruin everything. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. He'd stumbled upon someone in the middle of a suicide attempt, someone who was angry at him for intervening. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Emma, he said carefully, I can't just leave you here. Why not? She demanded, anger flashing in her eyes. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I made my choice. Because, Marcus said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Sometimes we make choices when we're not thinking clearly. And sometimes someone else gets to make a different choice. Emma stared at him for a long moment, tears tracking down her cheeks. You have no idea what you're doing. Maybe not, Marcus admitted, but I know I can't walk away from this. From you. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the rocks around them and burning off the last of the mist. In the distance, Marcus could hear the faint call of a hawk and the whisper of wind through pine needles. Normal sounds of a normal day. Except nothing about this moment felt normal. Emma seemed to deflate, the fight going out of her as quickly as it had come. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered. No one who cares if I'm alive or dead. That's not true, Marcus said, though he had no way of knowing if it actually was. And even if it were, it is now, because I care. She looked at him with such surprise that Marcus realized how long it had been since anyone had said something like that to her. The thought made his heart ache. You don't even know me, she repeated, but this time it sounded more like a question than a statement. No, Marcus agreed, but I'd like to. Getting Emma down the mountain proved more challenging than Marcus had anticipated. She was weak from what he suspected was dehydration and malnutrition, and her emotional state made her movements unsteady and unpredictable. More than once, he had to catch her arm as she stumbled on the rocky trail. We can rest whenever you need to, Marcus said, after Emma had to stop for the third time in less than a quarter mile. I'm fine, she insisted, though her pale complexion and labored breathing suggested otherwise. No, you're not, Marcus said gently. And that's okay. When's the last time you slept properly? Emma was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, she said, I've been living in my car for the past 2 weeks. Real sleep hasn't exactly been an option. The casual way she delivered this information made Marcus's stomach clench. Your car. Lost my apartment. Last month when I couldn't make rent. Lost my job the month before that. Emma's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, as if she were reciting someone else's grocery list. Funny how fast everything can fall apart. Marcus thought about his own recent upheavals, the divorce, the move, the complete restructuring of his life. Realized that, despite everything, he'd never been truly without options. His engineering job was secure, he had savings, family who would take him in if needed. Emma clearly hadn't had those safety nets. "What kind of work did you do?" he asked as they slowly made their way down another switchback. "Graphic design. Freelance, mostly." Emma kicked at a loose stone. "Turns out when the economy gets tight, pretty pictures are the first thing companies cut from their budgets." "That's a tough field," Marcus acknowledged. "Very competitive." "Yeah, well, I wasn't competitive enough, apparently." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. 3 years of building a client base, gone in 6 months. They walked, in silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps and the distant chirping of birds. Marcus found himself stealing glances at Emma, trying to read her mood, watching for signs that she might bolt back up the mountain or collapse from exhaustion. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said suddenly. "Of course. Why are you being so nice to me? I mean, really. You could have called 911 and walked away. Let someone else deal with the crazy lady on the mountain." Marcus considered the question seriously. "Honestly, I don't know if I have a good answer for that. Maybe because 6 months ago I was in a pretty dark place myself." "Divorce," Emma guessed. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess. You have that look." "What look?" "Like someone who used to believe in happy endings and recently found out they're bullshit." Marcus couldn't help but smile, despite the circumstances. "That's actually pretty accurate. So what pulled you out of it?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He'd been so focused on helping Emma that he hadn't really thought about his own journey through those dark months. "I guess, ... stubbornness, and hiking. Lots of hiking, that's it. And therapy," Marcus admitted. "A lot of therapy. And time. And accepting that sometimes life doesn't turn out the way you planned. But that doesn't mean it's over." Emma was quiet again, processing this. They were making better time now, the trail becoming less steep as they approached the lower elevations. Marcus could see his car in the parking lot below, a small blue sedan that suddenly seemed like the most important thing in the world. "Marcus," Emma's voice was small, almost childlike. "Yeah, I'm scared." The simple admission hit Marcus harder than all her anger and resistance had. Of what? Of trying again, of failing again, of ... She gestured helplessly. "Of everything." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Emma, listen to me. Whatever brought you to that place on the mountain, today, whatever combination of circumstances and pain and exhaustion, it doesn't have to be permanent. Things can change." "How do you know?" "Because they did for me. 6 months ago, I was sleeping on my brother's couch, eating cereal for dinner, and seriously considering whether my life insurance policy was worth more than my actual life." Emma's eyes widened. Really. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it happens overnight, but it can happen." They reached the parking lot, and Marcus led Emma to his car. She hesitated before getting in, as if crossing this threshold meant something significant. "Where are we going?" she asked. Marcus realized he hadn't thought that far ahead. "Well, first we're going to get you some food and water. Then, I guess we figure out the next step." "I don't have any money," Emma said quietly. "That's okay. I do. Why are you helping me?" It was the same question she'd asked on the mountain, but this time it carried a different weight. This time, It sounded like she genuinely wanted to understand rather than push him away. Because, Marcus said, starting the car, everyone deserves a chance to find their way back. As they drove down the winding mountain road toward Pine Ridge, Marcus caught Emma staring out the window at the scenery passing by. For the first time since he'd found her, she looked almost peaceful. "Marcus," she said as they entered the outskirts of town. "Yeah, thank you for not leaving me there." Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "Thank you for letting me help." The Pine Ridge Diner looked like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting, with its red vinyl booths and chrome fixtures gleaming under warm fluorescent lights. The lunch crowd was typical for a Tuesday afternoon. Few local ranchers, some tourists heading back from the mountains, and the usual collection of retirees who treated the place like their personal social club. Marcus chose a corner booth, where Emma could sit with her back to the wall, noting how she seemed to relax slightly when she wasn't visible to the entire restaurant. She'd been quiet during the drive into town, staring out the window with a mixture of wonder and apprehension, as if she'd forgotten what normal life looked like. "Order whatever you want," Marcus said, sliding a menu across the table. "I mean it, whatever sounds good." Emma's hands shook slightly as she opened the laminated menu. "I can't remember the last time someone bought me a meal." The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pinned back in a neat bun, appeared at their table with coffee and water. "What can I get you folks today?" "The pancakes," Emma said immediately, then looked embarrassed. "And eggs, scrambled, and toast, and bacon." She paused, glancing at Marcus uncertainly. "Is that too much?" "Not even close," Marcus assured her. "I'll have the same, actually." After the waitress left, Emma wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug like it was a lifeline. "This feels surreal," she said quietly. "What does sit in a normal place, with normal people, having a normal conversation? This morning I was." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "This morning you were in pain," Marcus said gently. "That's different from who you are." Emma looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. "How can you be so sure? You don't know anything about me. I know you're an artist. I know you had your own business. I know you've been fighting to survive. For months, even when it felt impossible." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Those aren't the characteristics of someone who gives up easily." "But I did give up," Emma whispered. "That's why I was on the mountain." "No," Marcus said firmly. "If you'd given up, you wouldn't have chosen somewhere so beautiful for your final moments. Part of you was still fighting, still looking for something worth holding on to." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this. When their food arrived, she ate slowly at first, as if her body had forgotten how to process real nutrition. But gradually, color began to return to her cheeks, and Marcus watched some of the tension leave her shoulders. "This is incredible," she said around a bite of pancakes. "I didn't realize how hungry I actually was." "Your body's been running on empty for a while," Marcus observed. "It's going to take some time to get your strength back." "Marcus," Emma said suddenly, setting down her fork, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay, what happens after this? After lunch, I mean. You can't babysit me forever, and I still don't have anywhere to go." Marcus had been dreading this question because he didn't have a good answer. He couldn't take her home, they barely knew each other, and it wouldn't be appropriate or safe for either of them. But he also couldn't just drop her back on the street. "I've been thinking about that," he said carefully. "There's a women's shelter in Boulder, About an hour from here. They have counselors, job placement services, temporary housing, no. Emma's response was immediate and firm. I can't do shelters. I tried that in Denver before I came here. It's not safe for someone like me. What do you mean, someone like you? Emma's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I'm not good with crowds, or noise, or being around people when I'm not stable. I had a panic attack my first night there, and they asked me to leave. Marcus felt a familiar surge of protective anger on her behalf. That's not right. You were vulnerable and they turned you away. It's not their fault, Emma said quickly. They have rules for a reason. I just... I don't do well in institutional settings. Marcus thought for a moment, an idea forming. What about a motel? Just for a few days, while we figure out something more permanent. I told you, I don't have money for I do, Marcus interrupted. And before you say no, it's not charity. It's an investment. An investment in what? In giving you time to remember who you are when you're not hungry and exhausted and sleeping in your car. Emma stared at him, tears forming in her eyes. Why are you doing this? Really? And don't say it's because everyone deserves help, because that's not a real answer. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. 6 months ago, when my marriage fell apart, I spent a lot of nights wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. I felt invisible, like my pain didn't matter to anyone, and I think maybe when we're drowning, the only thing that can save us is someone else choosing to see us. Really see us. Marcus met her eyes across the table. I see you, Emma. I see that you're hurting, and I see that you're stronger than you think you are. Emma wiped at her eyes with a napkin. I don't feel strong. Strong people rarely do, Marcus said. That's kind of the point. After lunch, Marcus drove Emma to the Pineview Motel, a clean but modest establishment on the edge of town. The manager, an elderly man with calloused hands and a weathered face, didn't ask questions when Marcus paid for a week in advance. The room was simpler, double bed with a faded floral comforter, a small table and 2 chairs, and a window that looked out over the mountains. To Marcus, it looked like any other budget motel room. But when Emma walked inside, she stopped in the doorway as if she'd entered a palace. It's perfect, she whispered, running her hand along the clean bedspread. There's a grocery store across the street, Marcus said, setting down the bag of basic supplies they'd picked up. And the diner delivers if you don't feel like going out. Emma nodded, but she seemed overwhelmed by the sudden shift from having nothing to having a safe space. Emma, Marcus said gently, I need you to promise me something. She looked at him warily. Promise me you'll call me if the dark thoughts come back. Day or night, it doesn't matter. He handed her a piece of paper with his number written on it. Promise me you won't try to handle this alone. Emma took the paper with trembling fingers. I promise, she said quietly. But Marcus, what if I'm too broken to fix? Marcus thought about all the nights he'd asked himself the same question. All the times he'd wondered if he was permanently damaged by his failures and losses. Then we'll be broken together, he said. And maybe that's enough to start with. 3 weeks later, Marcus found Emma sitting at the small table in her motel room, her laptop open and a cup of coffee steaming beside her. She looked different, healthier, more alert, with color in her cheeks and a focused intensity in her eyes that reminded him of the artist she'd described herself as being. Working on something? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. A portfolio website, Emma said, not looking up from the screen. I realized I've been so focused on what I lost that I forgot I still have skills, still have talent. Over the past 3 weeks, Marcus had visited Emma almost daily, sometimes bringing groceries or takeout, sometimes just sitting and talking. They'd developed an easy rhythm. He'd check in, make sure she was eating and sleeping, and she'd share small pieces of her story when she felt ready. He'd learned that she'd grown up in foster care, aging out of the system at 18 with no family support, that she'd put herself through community college by working 3 jobs and living in a studio apartment the size of most people's closets, that her graphic design business had been her pride and joy, the first thing in her life that had felt truly hers. Can I see? Marcus asked, gesturing toward the laptop. Emma turned the screen toward him, and Marcus felt his breath catch. The website was gorgeous, clean, professional, but with an artistic sensibility that made even the simplest elements feel alive. Her portfolio showcased logo designs, website mock-ups, and marketing materials that were sophisticated and creative. Emma, this is incredible, he said, scrolling through the pages. This is professional level work. Thanks, she said, but he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I'm scared to put myself out there again. What if I fail again? What if you succeed? Emma laughed, but it wasn't bitter this time. That might be scarier. Why? Because then I'd have to admit that maybe I'm worth something after all. Marcus looked at her carefully. In 3 weeks, he'd watched her transform from someone who wanted to die to someone who was afraid to hope. It was progress, but he could see that the real battle was just beginning. You know what I think? He said. What? I think you've been confusing your worth with your circumstances. They're not the same thing. Emma saved her work and closed the laptop. Marcus, can I ask you something? Always. What's your end game? Here, I mean, you've been taking care of me for weeks. You've spent money on me, time on me. What do you get out of this? It was a fair question, and one Marcus had been asking himself, honestly. At first, I just wanted to make sure you were safe. But now, Now, I think we're helping each other. How am I helping you? Marcus considered how to explain it. For months after my divorce, I felt useless. Like I couldn't do anything right, couldn't be what anyone needed. But helping you, it reminded me that I'm capable of making a difference, that my life has value, even when it doesn't look the way I planned. Emma nodded slowly. So we're both figuring out how to be human again. Something like that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window and casting long shadows across the room. Finally, Emma spoke again. I got a response to one of my job applications yesterday. Marcus felt his heart skip. Yeah. What kind of response? An interview next week. It's a marketing firm in Boulder, looking for a freelance designer for a 3-month project. Emma, that's fantastic. It's scary as hell, she corrected. But also, kind of exciting. I haven't felt excited about anything in so long. You're going to be great, Marcus said with complete conviction. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you rebuild yourself from nothing over the past 3 weeks. If you can do that, you can handle anything. Emma smiled, and Marcus realized it was the first completely genuine smile he'd seen from her. Will you help me practice? For the interview, I mean. Of course. A week later, Marcus waited in the diner, nursing his 3rd cup of coffee and checking his phone every few minutes. Emma's interview had been scheduled for 2 p.m, and it was now almost 4. He'd offered to drive her, but she'd insisted on taking the bus, wanting to prove to herself that she could handle the trip independently. When the diner door finally opened and Emma walked in, Marcus could tell immediately from her expression that something significant had happened. She looked dazed, almost disbelieving. "How did it go?" he asked as she slid into the booth across from him. "They offered me the job," she said quietly, on the spot. "Full 3-month contract, with the possibility of extension." "Emma, that's incredible," I cried, she said, laughing at herself. "Right there in the conference room. They asked me why I wanted the position, and I just ... lost it. Told them everything. About losing my business, about living in my car, about that day on the mountain." Marcus felt his stomach clench. "What did they say?" "The creative director, her name is Sarashi, said she'd been in a similar place 5 years ago. Said sometimes the best work comes from people who've learned how to fight for what matters. So they hired you because of your story, not despite it." "They hired me because of my portfolio," Emma corrected. "But they weren't scared away by the rest of it." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of you, Marcus," Emma said, her voice growing serious. "I need to tell you something, okay? I've been thinking about that day on the mountain, about what you said, about making a different choice." She paused, gathering her courage. "I think maybe ... maybe that wasn't just about saving my life. Maybe it was about saving my life for something." "What do you mean?" "I mean maybe the reason you found me wasn't just coincidence. Maybe it was because we both needed to remember that people can choose to care about each other, even when they're strangers." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of tension he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. "You think so? I think you saved my life," Emma said simply. "And I think maybe I helped save yours too." 6 months later, Marcus stood at the edge of Bear Creek Trail, the same spot where he'd found Emma that September morning. The mountains looked different, snow-capped and gleaming in the winter sunlight, the aspens bare but beautiful in their starkness. Emma stood beside him, wearing a new winter coat and carrying a small day-pack. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her eyes were bright with anticipation rather than desperation. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," Marcus confirmed. They started up the trail together, their footsteps crunching in the packed snow. Emma had insisted on returning to the mountain, wanting to face the place where she'd almost ended her story and prove to herself how much had changed. "You know," Emma said as they climbed, "I never thanked you properly. For what? For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." Marcus smiled, remembering that first terrible and wonderful morning. "You want to know the truth? Always. I didn't see anything special that day. I just saw someone who needed help, and I knew I had to try. And now..." Marcus looked at her, this woman who'd rebuilt her life from ashes, who'd turned her pain into purpose, who'd reminded him that healing was possible. "Now I see everything," he said. They walked on together, to people who'd found each other in their darkest moments and chosen to build something better. Behind them, their footprints marked a path down the mountain. Ahead of them, the trail stretched onward, leading somewhere neither of them could have imagined when their stories first intersected. The mountain stood silent and eternal around them, keeping its secrets and bearing witness to the small, persistent miracle of human resilience. And in the crisp winter air, their laughter echoed back from the peaks, a sound full of hope and second chances and the unshakable belief that every ending could also be a beginning.